Well, it is the last Thursday of the year, and apparently that means it's time for my world famous year in review video. I'll talk a little bit about the movies that I watched this year and share which ones were the wildest, the weirdest, which ones were the worst, and which ones I liked the most. I also just have some general reflections about the channel, about how things have been going, and about plans for next year and all that stuff. So, first of all, I think it's worth recapping some of the series that I did on this channel this year. There were really just two main ones. There are a lot of movies that are sort of linked to each other. There's a lot of movies that sort of come in pairs or something, even if they don't immediately follow each other week by week. But there were sort of two bigger series. One of them was Peter Weir films. I watched Master and Commander, Picnic at Hanging Rock, The Year of Living Dangerously, The Cars That Ate Paris, and The Mosquito Coast. Those were all extremely good movies, and I'm getting somewhat close to having seen most of Peter Weir's films, so I'll probably try and round out the collection in 2023. I may or may not review all of those movies, but I will be watching some more of them. Peter Weir, phenomenal director. If you saw any of my reviews for any of those movies, then you'll know I'm a huge, huge fan. Interestingly, The Year of Living Dangerously, that's one of his films. That was my most popular video last year with more than 60,000 views. I'll talk more about what to make of that kind of thing a little later on. But for now, great series with a lot of interesting movies that are accessible but also compelling, but also complex. What more could you want? The other series was John Huston films. And in particular, I was trying to do some of the less famous John Huston films. If you look on IMDb, you'll realize that really from the 50s to the 70s, John Huston was making some interesting movies that are not super widely known, but have relatively famous people in them. And I thought, maybe it'd be cool to check these out. So I watched Reflections in a Golden Eye, Wise Blood, Under the Volcano, and The Dead. I never got around to The Night of the Iguana because I've seen it years and years ago, but I think I will probably be rewatching that at some point, and there may or may not be a video on it, but there are some more on the list. The John Huston series was a lot more puzzling for me, to be honest, than the Peter Weir series. All of those, every one of those movies I listed except The Dead is kind of weird, kind of confusing, and of non-obvious merit at times. Reflections in a Golden Eye is pretty cool, but offbeat. Cool in an offbeat way. It's a movie that really exemplifies the changing of the guard between sort of classic Hollywood and something more modern. It's interesting. A lot of acting in it. You should go watch the review. I think it's a pretty good video. Wise Blood is a little bit more bewildering. Under the Volcano is in some ways the most straightforward, but feels a little bit pointless. The Dead is really a great movie. And watching that actually made me think that I need to reevaluate, or that I needed to go back and rewatch everything I'd seen from John Huston already. Although I enjoyed the three that I mentioned, I wasn't blown away by any of them. And I was, admittedly, at times somewhat skeptical of John Huston's credentials as an artist and an intellectual. There's no debate that he certainly had skills as a rogue and as an iconoclast and as an icon, as a figure that people think is cool. But yeah, I was a little bit skeptical about the first three movies, but The Dead is certainly legit. And who knows, maybe I was wrong about the first three as well. So like I said, John Huston, not anywhere near as simple as Peter Weir, especially these movies, threw me for a loop. And if you go back and watch the videos, I think they're all good videos, but I don't offer super firm conclusions about the first three movies, certainly. But yeah, thought that was a good series too. And there's a few more John Huston movies out there that I might do. Okay, I watched some movies this year that actually came out in 2022. Decision to Leave and Crimes of the Future, I reviewed both of those. In some ways, this was a tale of two directors, one of whom I am currently deeply, deeply engaged with, and a huge big fan of, that being David Cronenberg, and one of whom I used to be a huge fan of, but who maybe I'm not as much at the moment. That's Park Chan-wook. And, sort of according to that, decision to leave, to me, felt slightly disappointing, even though I think it is probably one of the best movies I saw this year, and probably one of the best movies to come out in 2022. It was still a little bit disappointing. And Crimes of the Future, I thought was phenomenal. Now, I think for most people, it might actually be the other way around, which movie they enjoy more. But that's how it was. For me, I think that both of the videos were pretty good. The Crimes of the Future video is one of the best videos on the channel this year, I think. Have done a number of Cronenberg films and have thought a lot about his stuff. And I really, for whatever reason, wanted to do that movie, extremely complicated, intense film, justice. And I'm really happy with the video for it. Like I said, I think it's one of the best on the channel. Crimes of the Future. I also saw, but did not review, the film The Whale, the new Darren Aronofsky movie with Brendan Fraser in it, and I don't think it's very good. But that was 2022. Not really that many movies that I saw that came out this year. I'm still probably going to catch a few more. I may see Tar, and I want to see the new Iñárritu movie, Bardo, and has some big subtitle. There's a few more I've got my eyes set on, but I guess I'll be watching them in 2023, most likely. So anyway, it's time, I guess, to move on to some of the more superlative things. Which movies were the best or whatever. I want to start with the category of the wildest movies, because clearly this channel is not all about good and bad, and in general those categories aren't even going to really do enough here. But let's start with wildest. So probably the wildest movies: Notes from an African Orestes, the Pasolini movie, if you can even call it a movie. It was the notes that he made about wanting to make an African Orestes, or a version of the Oresteia set in Africa. Pretty bad idea to do this. He was part of, I guess, a pseudo-intellectual movement of people who thought that Africa in the 50s and 60s was basically experiencing what Europe had gone through at the sort of in ancient Greece, which is kind of unfortunate Eurocentrism there. And as you go through the movie, Pasolini sort of starts to realize that maybe he's not on the right track, but there's just so many odd things that happen in this movie. For instance, the opening credits come up, and the first person that's introduced, I think, is Gatto Barbieri, who's a saxophone player. So immediately you think, what exactly am I watching here? After Pasolini spends a ton of time walking around Africa with his camera, pointing it at people, saying, "This could be Electra." It sort of cuts abruptly to him showing his notes to a group of black students at a university in Rome, and this goes not very well. Not a terrible movie. The downfall is that it's boring. Like I said, it's just his notes, so it doesn't really have any structure, any dramatic structure, and it ends up being pretty boring, even though it's short. You can watch this on YouTube, though, Notes Towards an African Orestes, I think. I can't remember if there's English subtitles for the one on YouTube, but you kind of don't need them anyway. But certainly that's an entry for wildest. Another entry for wildest is Black Shampoo. So this was the low-budget film, and this is one of the few truly low-budget films that I've done on the channel. Low budget being a bit different from an indie film. I guess there's to me those things are a little bit different, and it's interesting to see a low budget movie from like the 70s or whenever this came out. In particular, late 70s, early 80s. I think it came out right after Shampoo. I also reviewed Shampoo on the channel, by the way, which I'll talk a little bit about, more a little bit later. Black Shampoo really delivers in its sort of B-movie-ishness, in its sleaziness and its amateurism. There are some somewhat puzzling questions surrounding the world of low-budget film and the director, I can't remember his name. I remember I also listened to the director's commentary of the film, mainly out of curiosity to wonder if there would be some shade of humility from the director. But there isn't really, and it's not clear that there should be necessarily. I mean, it's an impressive feat to make the movie either way. So anyway, that's Black Shampoo. A pretty wild movie, I guess. Another one on the entry of wildest is The Car to the Date Paris. This movie is in some ways not as wild as you might at first think. It ends up basically being more of like a satire plus action movie, somewhat straightforward, actually reasonably good movie from Peter Weir. Certainly it's the most, it's the Peter Weir film that you might be most likely to dislike. That's a weird way of saying worst movie, but it's far from bad. The last, I think, wildest movie, these aren't in a particular order, but possibly the wildest one, I think, is The Red Spectacles, which I'll be talking about more shortly. The Momorosi movie. One of the most stylistically out there films I've ever seen. I think the only movie I can think that competes with it really is Funeral Parade of Roses, in terms of just like stylistic explosion of just different techniques and ideas. An extremely eclectic film that is also great. This is another video that I was extremely happy with. I think The Red Spectacles is also one of my best videos from this year. Okay, the worst movies. Well, I've mentioned one of them already, and that's Black Shampoo. There are things to appreciate about the low-budget nature of Black Shampoo, without a doubt. But it's, let's face it, a terrible movie. I've really never been one I have no interest in low-budget sleaze or cult stuff or anything like that. Maybe there are some people who would like it more, but not me. The other one is Bloodline, and I will put this list, there's only two in the worst list, I will put this one in order. Like I said, Black Shampoo does have merit as a low-budget film. It's cool that it got made, at least. There's some independent spirit involved with this. Bloodline has none of that. Enormous budget, huge cast, and somehow ends up being one of the worst movies out there. It's hard to even really figure out how it turned out so badly, how it exists. It is, a truly awful movie. And like I said, just a puzzle in terms of understanding how so many people just dropped the ball on this one consecutively. Just everybody involved with the production seemingly just phoned it in from day one, it would seem, and you end up with a complete mess that's borderline a movie, I would say. So that's Bloodline, terrible movie, has Audrey Hepburn in it. So I remarked upon watching it that it stole the crown from, what's that movie called? Green Mansions, which I reviewed last year. And I think Green Mansions was maybe my worst movie of last year. Well, somehow Bloodline has won down it to make an even worse Audrey Hepburn movie. And if there's a worse Audrey Hepburn movie out there, I would be shocked, but I'd love to see it at this point. Anyway, now we get to the favorites from this year. First, some honorable mentions. One of them is Shampoo. Shampoo's a very understated sort of 70s movie. I like that. So it's well suited to me. It has some nice comedic elements in it. It also ends up being a remarkably thorough and understated look at the early 70s, I guess, when it's set. That's cool. It also has emotional weight. It fundamentally, I guess, is sort of, it's interesting. There's sort of one of the fundamental dynamics of the movie is Warren Beatty's character being kind of sleazy. We're now learning more about Warren Beatty himself being kind of sleazy, which is interesting. But that being sort of put up against more genuine questions about how to lead a meaningful life, questions he's grappling with, creates a really interesting sort of empathetic context in the film. Lots of nice acting, like I said, understated, funny, and also a surprisingly deep movie and a surprisingly clear picture of a certain historical moment. So yeah, Shampoo I think is really a good movie that probably doesn't get enough attention. It's probably overshadowed by other movies from the 70s these days. We have another Warren Beatty movie as an honorable mention, which is Reds. I was quite happy with my video about Reds as well, and it got some traction. This movie is a great American epic film. You can tell that a ton of energy and thought went into making it. Now, the downfall is that, to me, it's a bit too on the nose, politically speaking. Maybe by the end of the movie, it sort of comes out seeming pretty dialectical, but to get there, you pass through some borderline cringy politicking, I think, that put me off a little bit. That's really the only thing I can complain about the movie, because otherwise it's a really subtle movie that's working on a lot of different levels. There's many parts of the movie that would be successful just as a sort of romantic drama set in the present time or whatever. But it's also a great historical film as well. So Reds, really, really, really good. I also mentioned The Hand of God here as a runner-up. My review to this was not super glowing, and I think I was mainly distracted by having seen The Great Beauty. Well, The Great Beauty is one of the movies that has changed my life, maybe more than any other, and that is extremely special to me. And The Hand of God is different in a lot of ways. You might say it's more personal. I would say it's more narrative. I was maybe somewhat confused by this, but I think it was still easily one of the best movies I saw this year. Sorrentino, like Fellini, swerving a little bit and doing some different things with his career here and there, but you can only be excited about where things are going, assuming he can find somebody to pay for his next movie. Okay, Crimes of the Future. Like I said, this was also an honorable mention. Yeah, this just delivered for me completely as a Cronenberg fan and as somebody who's really interested in the ideas that his movies are about. This movie delivers completely. You hope that he can make a few more movies before he passes away. Really cool, and like I said, I was happy with the video about it too. Annette, Leos Carax was one of the biggest discoveries for me for this year, and I did not review all the Carax films that I saw, but Annette is just such a brilliant, it's just such a fun and creative movie. I think creative is really the main word there. And I mean, it has a lot of stuff. It has a lot of meaning to it. Yeah, it delivers as a Carax film, basically. What can I say? And I'm just so glad it exists. Now, Annette feels maybe a little bit distracted by a modern context, I would say, and where some other Carax films feel a little bit more universal and a little bit more about these stories of romance and of life. Annette is that in a way, but like I said, it feels a little bit distracted by 2021 when it came out, which is a little bit unfortunate. But overall, such a creative and cool movie. Okay. Those are the honorable mentions. Now we've got the three, and these are in order of my favorite movies of the year. The first one was Chess of the Wind. This, unfortunately, I didn't do a very good job on the video of this. It was okay, because in some ways there's not a lot to say about this movie except that it was a beautiful shock to me. I had expected it to be kind of a boring movie. This is an Iranian movie from the 70s that was lost for like 40 years. And had the film not been lost, I think it would be extremely well known and would have had a huge influence on world cinema, because it is a brilliant movie. Part of my enjoyment of it may well be the surprise factor of it. The fact that I was not at all expecting a twisted, stark story. The cinematography in this movie is insane. It's amazing. Like, up there with maybe 4 or 5 movies ever. Incredibly beautiful film. Like I said, it's possible that my surprise at just what the movie was sort of inflates my view of it. I do think it has some issues, like being kind of hard to follow and confusing. But man, it's just so cool. And if you are into movies and are looking for some obscure something you haven't seen yet, and you haven't seen this, you gotta watch it, because like I said, it kind of blew my mind that a movie like that exists. Was not at all what I was expecting. Chess of the Wind. Yeah. What a sick movie. Number 2 is The Red Spectacles, as I already mentioned. This is one of the most off-the-wall movies you'll ever see in terms of style, but it also is an extremely deep movie about modernism and postmodernism, I guess. And it also is a compelling and emotional film. I remember this movie really has something for everyone. In some ways, it is a really weird, complex, and dense movie, and I think my review maybe drives that point home to some degree, but it's also, honestly, a movie that almost anybody could watch if you just go into it looking for just a playful, different kind of experience. The Red Spectacles will give you that. So off the wall and just different and fun to watch. Emotional, compelling, deep. Yeah, what a phenomenal movie. Another one that just kind of blew my mind, that it's out there. And like I said, I was really happy with the video about this movie as well. So all around great. But this takes us to number 1, which is, I think, the best video on the channel from this year. Ironically, not one that got much traction, but the best video that I made and the best movie that I saw this year by miles, which is Holy Motors, another Leos Carax film. Speaking of movies where you're just not sure how it exists, or speaking of just an overwhelming level of creativity from Leos Carax, this has that, and a movie that is immeasurably deep, but also provokingly bizarre, and a movie that strangely has an extremely deep personal connection for me, I would say. As well, a movie in some ways made for me. Only for me. You can't watch it. A movie that just speaks to conflicts and ideas that have been circulating in my life for decades, I guess. I'm getting old. And yeah, just an incredible movie. I don't know what more I can really say about it, but I kind of knew when I was watching it that it was something special for me and that it was going to be a highlight of my year, and we'll see when I next watch something that is going to have the same impact on me. I don't anticipate that it'll be anytime soon. Could be years, honestly. Amazing movie for me. I realize it could be somewhat polarizing. It is kind of out there, I guess. But incredible movie for me. And I was also, like I said, very happy with my review about it. So those are the highlights or whatever. Now I want to give a little bit of just sort of reflection on the channel. So as I alluded to, some of these videos did a lot better than other ones. And one thing that happened this year is that the channel crossed the 100 subscriber milestone, which is significant in YouTube land because it gives you a boost with the algorithm. And you can actually see very clearly on my channel, even if you don't know exactly where 100 subscribers came, if you go back, it's very clear where the videos kind of jump up from like 30 or 40 views to like 200 or 300 views or whatever. And that's kind of interesting. I've said from the beginning that this channel exists as a diary for me, a way to get myself to watch more movies and a way to think about movies as I watch them. And it's still successful at that. Now, on the other hand, it would be naive to say that that is entirely the goal or whatever. For instance, I bought a camera, a nicer camera to record these videos on, using it now. Why would I do this if I were just doing a diary? Why would I be recording them at all? Why would I be posting them publicly, right? Is that really all to the story? Well, not exactly. I think it is still correct to say that my number one goal is really something quite simple and personal, which is to document the movies and I also think it's cool to cover sort of more obscure stuff that's just not talked about much, and to try and do these movies justice, and put that out there for people who may want to find it. And I'm happy with how that has gone so far. But the growth in views, to some degree, makes you wonder about purpose, or it makes you reflect on your purpose a little bit, just inherently. And I'll attack this a little bit sideways, but let me just say that, well, I can look at the analytics now, actually, and get you the most up-to-date information, because that's crucial, I know. So the most popular video on the channel now by far is The Year of Living Dangerously, as I mentioned, which has 61,681 views as of right now. And the swimming pool, which had been the most famous one, is approaching 30,000. Reds is 7,500. Caligula, 6,700. Unbearable Lightness of Being, 6,300. And then there's maybe overall 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 or so videos, around 20 videos with 1,000 views or more, which is interesting. Before we get too carried away, the watch time on all these videos is extremely low, and all of them follow the very common sort of steep drop off in engagement, with people mainly watching the first few seconds and then deciding that the video is too boring or whatever, which I don't blame them. The videos are boring. I hope at least that people are watching them sped up. I know I do when I go back and watch stuff, but I watch all videos sped up a lot. So anyway, there has obviously been a huge increase in viewership since last year, even with asterisks about how much of the videos do people actually watch. Not much. Nonetheless, this is a lot more people watching not much of the video than last year, where there were far fewer people watching not very much of the video. There's some other kind of interesting things to note here. For one, the United States is actually no longer in the top 5 of the most of the countries where the videos are viewed the most. The Year of Living Dangerously, I think that video was most widely viewed in India, also in Indonesia, which maybe makes a little more sense. And that's kind of interesting. I'm very happy to support an international audience. I do wonder if, to some extent, I guess maybe these movies serve as some type of currency in certain parts of the world, and being in the know about them is interesting. And, my videos are really not plot summary, and so I think for many people who are looking to just learn what happens in the movie, they might actually be quite disappointed by these videos. There's a lot of videos out there on YouTube that are just summary, like pure summary of a movie. There's a lot of channels that will just take clips from the movie and then get some sort of automated voiceover thing to just read the plot summary off Wikipedia, basically. And a lot of these channels do really well. And I think that mainly these also are being viewed in a similar parts of the world where there is maybe not as much just access to the original film. People aren't as connected online or whatever, or they're just, these movies were never distributed there in the first place, or things like that. And that's kind of interesting, because my videos, I think, maybe are being promoted for similar reasons, but they don't serve a similar purpose. So I hope it's not too much of a disappointment for people to discover that, for instance, these videos don't contain any clips of the movie. They also don't say what happened in them. Speaking of clips of the movie, it's also somewhat noticeable that my videos that tend to be more successful tend to be a little bit more on the lascivious side. Obviously, my videos are not particularly lewd, but the ones that are about films that are more sexually explicit often perform better. And I mean, look, welcome to YouTube. The medium is the message, as they say, and this shouldn't really be a surprise. You can see, to some degree, where your viewers are coming from in terms of what videos your content is recommended on. And for me, a lot of my videos get recommended on like some more some things that are maybe like borderline adult films on YouTube or whatever, which is like kind of weird. And again, it could be that just in certain parts of the world, there's not very much access to that kind of thing. And so people come more to YouTube, and they are hoping maybe that my videos have that kind of content in them. So that's kind of weird in some ways. But on the other hand, it could be that, that's just where people are, and you got to put your shop on Main Street, and so people will get recommended videos from those videos, because that's videos that those are widely seen. May or may not be what they're looking to find in these videos. It's kind of hard to know, to be honest. So that's some brief factual information about the growth of the channel. Like I said, that does bring into focus questions about the focus and the ideas of the channel. For instance, it has crossed my mind to maybe do more videos from India or something like that. Now, the one movie that I have done from India, which is Sholay, is not a particularly well-performing video, so hard to know if that actually makes any sense. And I don't anticipate really doing that, but you wonder about it. You also wonder about making videos that will be more engaging for people, or that people will actually like to watch. Because, as I said, the videos, their main downfall is that they are boring. The goal is to do justice to the movies. That's the number one goal, but they're not particularly entertaining, and I will happily admit that. Are there adjustments that could make the movies more engaging? I guess. Is it worthwhile to make those adjustments? I don't know. So I wouldn't anticipate anything happening soon, but these things are on my mind. And to some extent, these are just inevitable thoughts of a channel that begins to grow slightly. So who knows? I'm not too worried about it now. Maybe if this bizarre trend of growth continues, then I might think about it more. But for the time being, I would anticipate the channel remaining exactly the same. So hopefully you like it. It does seem like there is some level of engagement, which is cool. I really enjoy hearing from people either directly in comments or seeing stories that people might share about their movies. It's interesting on some older movies in particular to hear people talk about the times when they saw it 50 years ago in theaters and all this stuff. It's interesting. Puts quite a perspective on these films, which are for me always, which for me have always been a very private and independent experience. Basically, something that's completely disconnected from any kind of historical context, especially older movies, are an exercise in intellectualism, not in nostalgia. And it is very interesting to see that other mode of viewership come into play from people who actually know these movies as part of their life, not merely as some historical artifact or whatever. So it's very interesting. I'm not very good at responding to comments, but sometimes I do. So I realize that in a lot of ways those were not fully formed reflections. But in truth, I'm still turning over some of these things in my head. For now, the direction of the channel I would anticipate will stay the same. I have a lot of great movies planned. I know there's some pending requests that I'm hoping to get to. A lot of cool things coming down the pipeline. The balance of movies has changed a little bit from here and there. I know some of the last ones have been a little bit more, some bigger films have come to the channel. We have some obscure movies coming up. And the number one goal continues to be just sharing interesting stuff that I enjoy watching. Yeah, and trying to bring those movies to people to some degree, I guess. Anyway, that's 2022. And I guess in a year, we can do it all over again.